Today is the final eGlobal Author Salon session, Manuscript Editing 101, an author's approach to self-editing. My name is Mira Gold, and I'm a North American author of fiction, screenplays, as well as poetry. How about you, WordSpinner?
I'm WordSpinner, an author from Texas, living the dream.
I'm John Creason, and I am a discovery writer living in Toronto. Now on to Lynn.
I'm Lynn Jordan, and I live on the west coast of the U.S., and I've been writing for a lot of years. I've been computing for a lot of years, so I love the AI process.
On to you, Clary.
I am Clary. I am a romance and a novel author living in the Midwest, United States.
And you, Manon?
My name is Manon Doucette. I'm a non-fiction published author. I also have my own edition publishing house.
Oh, what is the name of your publishing house, Manon?
Mary Anderson Publisher Limited.
Be sure to link that so that I can put that in the description section. Thank you, Manon.
Thank you.
Sure. To dive deeper into editing, I'm going to hand the reins over to Cece.
Excellent. Glad to be here. Maybe I can share my screen and you guys can see. Give me 1 second. There we go. Everybody can see this?
Perfect.
Excellent. So editing, that's what comes after the writing. Before we go into this, I would love to tell you that, hey, I can teach you everything we need to know about editing, and not only this afternoon, but maybe my short presentation. Not going to happen. It's a lifetime process, but we can certainly dig into it, learn some of the tools that we need so we can edit better. Without further ado, there's several different types of edits. There's developmental, so that's your story, your storyline, your content. It's a big picture, basically. Second would be the copy editing, paragraph structure, sentence structure, tone, readability, spelling, and grammar. And you have your line edits, which is basically just what it says, a line-by-line review. We're not looking at content. And lastly, you have your proofreading, which is just a lighter read for little tweaks, typos, grammar, punctuation, etc. Now, when it comes to content editing, excuse me, we're going to be looking at several items. We're going to look at the storyline, the pacing, make sure there's no loose ends or threads, the flow of the story. We also want to know that there's no underdeveloped plot, there's organization and structure. And lastly, we have to look at characters. Do the characters have an arc? Do they resonate with the reader? So what does that mean, resonating? That's where I like to bring in Save the Cat. We have to give the reader a character that they like. And I'm talking about the protagonist, of course, not the antagonist. But on that note, we have to have good and bad characters in our story, and we have to flesh them out equally. So when you're looking at content, you say you do a read on your manuscript. You want to know if your characters have a clear character arc. If your character is the same person at the end of the story as at the beginning of the story, that needs to be fixed. There's no arc there. You have to ask yourself, did you cheer for your protagonist? You want to know if your antagonist was three-dimensional. Did the middle of your book feel flat? Sorry about that. Didn't mean to flash forward. Were you bored while you were reading? How can you increase attention? What was your favorite scene? Why? And if you could just change one thing in your book, what would it be? These are questions you'll ask yourself after doing a first read. Then we come down to chapters and scenes. Every chapter should have a strong start. The reader should want the answer to a question that comes to their mind as you're developing the story in the first chapter. Every chapter should also have a strong finish that ends with a hook. Why? Why do we need a hook? Because we want them to ask a question, whatever the question may be, and we want them to turn the page to get the answer. If they don't turn the page and they go to sleep, you've lost them. The ingredients that you need for these sort of things are conflict, you need goals for your characters, and you need motivation. Now there's details, details to avoid, cliches, shallow point of view, omniscient. You're going to say, but I want to write omniscient. Okay, that's your thing. Some people still do. It's not done as much as it used to be, but it's still done. But you want to avoid head hopping unless you are an established multi-million-dollar author who has a great following who doesn't care if you head hop. You want to avoid poor grammar, names in dialogue. So that's a rookie mistake, constantly putting names in dialogue. Avoid that if possible. You want to avoid exposition. You want to avoid adverbs that end in ly because they're weak. You want to avoid telling. You'd rather do showing. And passive voice, passive being was with a verb with an ing on the end. Yes, you will have times when you will use was with an ing on the end of the verb. That's going to be when the character is currently mid-action and you have to show it that way. So necessaries, realistic dialogue, forward-propelled scenes, research, do your research. Word economy, what does that mean? Don't put a bunch of junk words in there that don't push the story forward. Watch your punctuation, make sure you have a setting, make sure you employ sense, and have strong first and last lines. Passive words, sequence killers, and creating deep POV. Create deep POV, you have to put yourself into the character. One of the good ways to do that is to use pronouns instead of names. Because when you start using a character's name, you're immediately showing it like with a filter, like you're not in the character's head. Try to use pronouns. Avoid omniscient phrases and don't describe the POV character. Don't tell me that character frowned. Because when I'm frowning and I'm in a conversation with someone, I don't think to myself, oh, I just frowned. Don't let your characters do that. And if possible, avoid tags. Mainly, I would say dialogue tags. Try to use action beats and not to be confused with the beats that we see used in generating AI content. Action beats are when you use an action so you can show the reader who the speaker was. And you want to avoid filtering phrases and author intrusion. Now there's passive words and sequence killers. As, that, which, there, and while. Go through your manuscript, do a search, and see how many of these you have, and if you need to have them. And do they mess up the chronology of your sentences? Your first page. That should contain action, introduce the main character, indicate the genre, and make the reader ask a question. So to make edits easier. Now here's a thought on this. If you can tighten up your writing on the front end, then when you get to the back end, the editing part, your job, your life will be much easier. And please don't think that I'm saying that you should be the final editor of your story. You shouldn't, but you should give your editor the best manuscript you can give them. So we have Scott Bell with a lock methodology. Deborah Dixon has goal, motivation, conflict. You've heard a lot probably about scenes and sequels. And then lastly, my favorite, story structure, plotting device, Save the Cat. Big picture stuff. Oops. All right. Moving forward, I want to give you all a couple of things really quickly, but I can't find the chat. I will hand these off after I'm done with what I'm going to tell you. I will give you copies of the Snyder beat sheet. I will give you all shortcuts and links to find the tools for the beat sheet. For example, what do I mean by that? When you're looking right here and you're going to write that, this is, I think, the tool that Mira Gold uses. If you're going to write the Snyder beat sheet, if you're going to write a story and you're going to use a Snyder beat sheet, you put your count here. Of course, this one actually works with screenplays, scripts. Now, I'm going to share that with you, but I'm also going to share with you this cool little tool I found. Put novel. You enter the page count that you want. Say you want your page to be 250. And so we map it. And it tells us how many pages each of the parts of the Snyder beat sheet will be. The catalyst, the setup, the theme stated, the debate, the bad guys closing in, how many pages are going to be in fun and games, and the B story. Now, it's a rough guide. You don't have to follow that. That may or may not be what you use. And then there's lastly another one right here that actually gives you the same thing, but you can put words or pages, and it gives you genre and what their average word count is. That way, if you're new and you're not sure which way to go, this gives it to you right there. Next, what we did.
Just so you know, John has gone ahead and put in the beat sheet calculator link and the Save the Cat, and we're going to go ahead and grab the Jessica Brody one for you as well.
You guys are so awesome. Appreciate that. I'm not reading chat, so I'm not really catching up. So if there's any questions or anything going on, y'all feel free to let me know. I'm also going to give you a blank. I'm also going to be handing out a blank beat sheet, which looks like this. You fill it out with yourself. I like to print one. And at the back end of it, it shows you what exactly each of these is. So it tells you what the opening image, the theme statement, the setup, it tells you what all of these are right here. It explains it all for you so you don't have to second guess. And I'll be handing that out later on in the class as a PDF and as a Word document. Which brings us back to the one thing that we've been working towards all week long for those of us who have been present as much as we could be during the week. We've been generating a book. This is probably what I would call a coming of age, new adult, urban fantasy, that nature. So the protagonist, she's Laura, and she's between the ages of 19 to 22, which is why I say coming of age. Now, I'm going to do some edits on this. Please understand this is the first run of edits, and I would go through several rounds of edits. So this is not going to be, wow, it's going to be a picture perfect thing. No, I'm just going to go through and show you a couple things that I would fix here, a couple things that I would look for when I'm fixing it. One of the first things that I do whether I get a manuscript from a human or one that was AI generated, I like to look for nasty little exclamation points. My goodness, 18 in 3 chapters. So typically when I edit, I don't want to see more than 1 or 2 a book. That's just me. They don't really belong, I don't feel, in prose. They're overused and we don't need them, not as much as we use them. So I always do a search for that. And when you see them, go in and fix them. Now, the next thing I would do is I would open up this manuscript, which is already open right here, and I would look at it and I would find, does it start the way I want it to start? Some of these things I'm going to mention to you, they are what I would call personal preference. I like to start with dialogue because it's immediately engaging. And this does not. It starts with the typical from what I've seen from AI. Not always, but mostly with just giving me some setting. And I don't like that. So what I do is I would take this right here. Oh, you know what? Before I go into that, let me talk about track changes. I don't know to what level everybody here is in their writing journey, but let me just tell you, track changes, you click it to open it up right there. So now it'll track everything I do. So if I don't like something, I can put it back like it was, or I can see what I did. So since I like to start with dialogue, I usually would take this right away, put it in front, right? So let me show you this trick about track changes. Right here, it's set up so that it doesn't show me what I changed. But if I wanted to, I would click this sidebar right here, this little thing right here that was red, that's now gray, and it shows me what I've changed. If I don't want it, I just click that and it hides it. So I would start out right here with dialogue. But since I prefer my dialogue to start with the protagonist and Cleo is not, obviously you can see from here, it's POV of Lara. So I need to put Lara's here. So what would I do to change that? Here's what I would do. I would bring in the next sentence in here. And since I don't want this to be, I'm changing Cleo and I, because this is first person, my. You can see that I right here. So that's first person. I want this to be Lara's. So Lara's going to start off the dialogue, and then Cleo's going to respond. And of course, I have to change the pronouns there and everything. So then, now that I've set that, and I've got where I want to start with dialogue, then I can play with this and see, okay, for now, I can leave it like that. It's not killing me and I'll walk further.
So
Remember
what do you see? Where it says, I exclaimed, her eyes sparkling up at the top.
Yes,
How would you?
Yes. How would I fix it? Like that. And
Yeah. So now I know that because many of you may not know that Cecil was one of my first editors. And when I went through edits extensively with her, that was one of the things that she always drilled in, to always start with my protagonist. But she also, can you talk about how your protagonist can't see her own eyes or can't see her own hair?
And I haven't even gotten to that yet. Okay, so what I had to do there, and I'm so glad you brought that up, Mia. I had to fix that because I had myself describing my eyes. Like, how can I see my eyes when I'm at the park and I'm not looking in a mirror? And please don't start saying, oh, I need to put a mirror in place so that I can show my own character's eyes in first person sparkling with enthusiasm. No, please don't do that. Not even in third person. So what I have to do is I just had to switch around the fact that her heart is racing. You can feel your heart. So I had to change that. And then Cleo replied, her eyes. So does that kind of make sense? And some of this stuff, you're going to make the first change, and then you're going to go through the second time and you're going to say, holy moly, what was I thinking? I didn't have a period in here, or I didn't have this person, I didn't change this POV. And that's okay, because you should go through this several times. And so then this right here, I'm not crazy about it. Moving on. I'm not crazy about it because it feels more like exposition to me, but I'm going to fix it later. What do I mean by exposition? It's more telling me. It's just dumping this information instead of making it more active. So I would make it more active right here.
Would you do something to it to call it out later if you brought it into something like pseudo-write and wanted to rewrite it there?
I don't use pseudo-write a lot for rewriting, but when I want to call something back to address, which at this stage, after the first run through, there's still going to be so much that I have to give it just as much attention as I gave it on the first edit. But when I want to call something out, I always put a XXX, because never, ever have I written a book that had XXX in it. I know that means something. I know it means porn or whatever, but I've never used it. So I know that's one guaranteed way that I will be able to find what I want to fix in a book. I always put XXX, and that brings me to it. Whether that means I wanted to add a sex scene, or whether that means I wanted to expand a fight scene, XXX, and brings me to it. Because at first glance, I'm just trying to get a few of the things right, not the entire thing perfect. And I know some of you might say, "Oh, that sounds like such a pain. You go through your manuscript several times." Welcome to editing. All right, so this right here, I know that I'm going to come back and fix it, but I know that I'm going to come back and look at everything. Here we go. Now, because I've seen part of the creation of this, I know that the historic signpost has something to do with her mother. So I'm not freaking out about that yet. I'm watching it. It's eerily familiar. Now, what did we talk about earlier? We talked about the first page, right? So the first page, first chapter, particularly the first page, should give you the protagonist. It should have you ask a question or wonder about something as a reader. It should also identify the genre. I don't feel that eerily familiar is quite strong enough for me to say, oh, that's fantasy or paranormal. But I know that it's coming. I might need to hasten its arrival because pacing. I want it to be, and that was me snapping my fingers. I want people to be able to just plow through the book, boom, reading and just getting caught up in the moment. Right now, we have a little bit of foreshadowing. She's pulling out a photo that she always carries with her that was taken. It's compared to the signpost in the background. So we know right now we're establishing a mystery. And that's bringing us a question. Okay, why? There's a mystery here. What's going on? Why do we have this photo with her mother, and why is she carrying it? And so right now I need a question answered. Now, because I didn't write this work, I have to keep a close eye on what question it's going to answer. So pretend that someone had sent me this manuscript to edit. I have to wonder, what is this about? Because I haven't read the book. I know this was created over the week, but I didn't see a lot of it. So I don't know exactly what is happening. So I'm coming in cold. So I know the signpost, the photo, I've got to keep that in my mind as something that's going to happen. So she pulls it up. She says that's the same and that's strange, etc. Then we come into a dog barking, and a big dog goes to attack a small dog. And we come to the end of the stride. Now, for those of you that have been here for a while, you know that there's 2 beats that make a stride, and we have just encountered the end of the first stride. This is fine for me. And then we continue it. What do? You take out the 3-4 because you can't have that in your manuscript. You would take it out if it were on top, but someone took it out already.
Hey, Cece.
Yeah.
One of the questions, I was looking at that section that pseudo-write story engine generated, where it said that she pulls her picture out. Instead of her putting the picture out, would it be better for her to maybe look at it on her phone, or another way to show that? What is your thought on that?
So my thought on that is this. I don't have the setting of when this happened. I'm going to assume it's contemporary. I also don't when the photo was taken. Years ago, that could be prior to cell phones being, this whole thing of cell phones and pictures, that's only been prevalent for, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe? I don't know, some. So I don't know when it was taken. So I can't presume that would be the case. So for now, I have to keep that in the back of my mind. No problem. But it's more than likely if it's a photo of her mother younger and her mom's dead now, and it was years ago, I would leave it as a photo. But I would wonder what always carries it with her. And that's going to come to light, I hope, in the future. But I'll have to see as I read the whole thing because, we're coming in on it cold right now. So we're just trying to get our bearings. So as much as I want to fix little tiny stuff, I have to get a feeling for the story. If I had this manuscript handed to me, the first thing I would have done is read the whole thing to try to figure out what the heck's going on so that then I can go and put together. But I've got 3 chapters and I've had it for about less than 24 hours. So we're going to go with what we've got, which is just going to edit this a little bit, do some thoughts and bounce some ideas back and forth just like we are so we could see where we would go with this. The prose, I'll be honest with you, is really not bad. I truly cannot complain about the prose on this piece in this instance right here, what we're looking at. So it's got tension, it's clear, it seems realistic. So I just keep moving on just because I've got to figure out got to get my bearings on this story and orient myself. So we've got the big dog charging a big little bitty Pomeranian, and it skids to a halt and dissolves to a whimper. That is not normal. So that makes me think, personally, all I can think that would cause that is magic. I don't know what anyone else would think, but my mind would go to, like, why is it afraid? There's got to be something that I don't know about this, which makes me think supernatural. So that I'm not uncomfortable with that as a genre placer. It's not smack you in the face, but it's something I'm not uncomfortable with. So we keep moving. It hesitated for moments as if reconsidering. And this is a case where the word as is not an issue. It's not messing up with chronology. So the girls exchange looks of amazement. They laugh and then they meet. Then a woman comes, her gaze fixed on the little palm. It describes a woman, not too much, just perfect amount. And then we go back to speaking, dialogue. And he's mine, the woman replied, her voice melodic and warm. Don't mind that at all. Nice to meet you. She gestures towards her friend who offered a friendly smile. Yeah, that's okay as dialogue. It's setting the scene. It's fine. It's driving the story forward. The conversation is fine right here. But here we have something that tells us that she's feeling something extraordinary. Can anybody think of a better way to say this that would be more engaging?
Hold on just a minute.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that to you. How does that feel?
I know. I'm sorry. I'm muted to call up. But as we stood there chatting with Anna and her brave little Pomeranian, let's see, I couldn't help but feel that there was more to this encounter than met the eye. I would probably kill that section that says I couldn't help but feel that there was more to this encounter than met the eye, because just hearing that there was an undercurrent of intrigue in the air, I would want to expand on that. What does an undercurrent of intrigue in the air feel like? Is there a crackle? Is there a crackle of energy electrifying the air? Does the hair on her arms stand on end? Does she feel the buzz of that electricity along her arms? Does she feel a nervous energy making her fidget? I would need to know that. And then I would take that content and then I would wrap it into my sentence. Now, when I'm editing like what Cece is saying, I do go in and I will highlight an area and then I will mark off onto the side as a comment that I am going to add description. But here I would state that what kind of body language or sensation is she feeling? And I would want to describe that. Now, if I knew off the top of my head right then and there what that sensation was, like I was saying, does she feel the energy buzzing across her skin? What does it feel like? If I know what I want to say, then I would say it now. But if I didn't want to break the rhythm of what I'm doing in that single read where I'm sitting there going from beginning to end to see where all of my maybe gaps are or the pacing, then I would just add the notes.
Yep, exactly. And right here, the word feel, it's a filter word.
Now,
It's a telling.
Yes,
if it
filter word.
Now, Manon shared a little excerpt here. It says, as we stood there chatting with Anna and her brave Pomeranian, we all shared a laugh. It was a momentary respite from the strange coincidences and mysteries and the mysterious signposts that had brought us to that point. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this encounter than what met the eye. So when you're saying that there was more to this encounter than met the eye, it's a good direction to go. And I think Manon added some additional detail there. But then we can even drill down further. So Manon just took a single sentence and expanded it into a bit more information. Now, it doesn't mean that she would leave it exactly like that 100%. She would still have to do a second read, a third read, a fourth read on this manuscript. And every time she did a read, she would then take a look at some of these passages and say, okay, this expanded it in this run, but maybe the second time she read it, she might go in and take out the area that says, however, I couldn't shake the feeling, because she would then know that she needed to plant an Easter egg somewhere or sprinkle some breadcrumbs. So she would take that information out, and then she would slowly begin to let that information unfold organically.
Yeah.
Sorry, Cece, I didn't mean to
Oh,
interrupt.
that was great. And I like what Manon did with that. I like that. And so the moral is there's many things we can do with this. Could we leave it as is? Of course we could. And put the world in because of that? Absolutely not. It'll be fine. But we always want to tighten it so that it makes it more realistic to people and brings them in and draws them in, especially in first person and third person deep. Not bad as is, but it can always be made better. And we were talking about filter words. And so I want you to think of filter words like this. It's a filter through which something is displayed. In other words, I saw him do this. Don't tell me you saw him do this. Show me what you saw him do without using the word saw. Just say he, blah, 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 whatever he did. And the words that I would call filter words are, of course, saw, heard. My mind is just so off today. I don't want to say saw. So it's anything that has to do. Mira, give me some because my brain is fried right now.
So one of the things that I did when I was first learning about writing, I had such a hard time understanding what a filter word was or how to make something more active. And I kept saying things like, I walk, I talk. And instead of showing what that action looked like, I was relying on that telling section of that filter to say, I walk. Well, where am I walking to? Just saying that I'm walking is not enough. Now, here it says, I couldn't help but feel that there was more to this encounter. When you're using those filter words, you are telling the reader that you couldn't help but feel this way. What feeling is that? What innate feeling is that character experiencing? Just to say, I couldn't help but feel that there was more to this encounter doesn't tell the reader enough. I need to give more specific details, because if I tell John, hey, John, I couldn't help but feel that there was more to this encounter between these ladies, but my interpretation of what might be more to this encounter may differ from John. It may differ from what Clary might perceive. So I need to be very specific. I need to make sure that I guide the reader. I don't want to leave anything vague enough to where the reader might misunderstand what it is that I'm trying to convey. So I would cut out, I couldn't help but feel that there was more to this encounter. I would actually put some dialogue in there. And dialogue is a really good thing. Keep in mind, it says, but as we stood there chatting with Anna and her brave little dog, what are they chatting about? How can I show how Laura is feeling in dialogue? What kind of conversation can I have? They just went through that episode where the dog was coming barreling down. They could have a conversation about, wow, I thought your little dog was toast. You could have some dialogue in there that conveys how Anna is reacting to the situation and how Laura is feeling and how she sees it. And remember, what she may feel internally may not match what her dialogue is. How often are you in a conversation and you say one thing, but you're thinking something entirely different? You want your character to have that same experience. Is that more in the line of what you were talking about, Cece? Because I know in the edits that you did with me, you were always telling me, if they're chatting, what are they chatting about?
Yeah. And I can understand that it doesn't want to go into that because it's not important, right? It's not, if we spend too much time on the chatting, we're going to lose the fact that she's got this feeling, right? She's got the sensation that's going on with her. And there's many ways to fix this, you guys. There's so many ways, and we could have fun with all of them. And each one would be like, what is my preference? We don't even have to say that. All she has to say is right here, there was more to this encounter than met the eye. And then you go, whoa, why? What? There's that thought. There's so many tricks that you can play with words. So if we moved on to the next one, and then I saw him, a man behind a tree, etc. What I do, because I'm a strange little writer here, this does not grab my attention. I want something that grabbed my attention. I want to see something like that. And then I saw him. I go, whoa, okay, because that stands out. When you break up your paragraphs and you put some different lengths of lines in between them, it brings your attention. Mana has her hand raised, I think.
Yeah. Because the first time you start talking, it says you took all the exclamation points away because you don't like them in the book.
Yeah.
But in the thing like that, when you get into a thriller or something which surprise inside of it, so how would you go about it if you take all these things off, most of them?
You can leave some, but I don't like to see 18 of them in 3 chapters. 18 in 3 chapters is 6 per chapter. And if the chapters have 7 pages each, that's 1 a page. That's a lot. You're overly charging my trying to get my attention right there, instead of letting me get attention on the spots where I should be paying attention. Like in the very beginning right here, when absolutely, I can't wait to get started. We don't need that. Her eyes sparkle with enthusiasm, right? We don't need that.
True. Okay.
One of the ways
Go ahead.
One of the ways that Cece, when I was learning the writing craft, one of the things that Cece explained to me about it is that, because let me tell you, I was an exclamation queen, and I had them all over the place. I think they were littered all over my manuscript. And one of the things that Cece told me was that she wanted me to think of it as the old fable of the boy who cried wolf. The more times the boy cried wolf and all the villagers came out to take a look, he said it so often that it lost its effectiveness. And you can do the same thing with exclamation points. It can be so commonplace that it no longer holds its emphasis. So that's why you want to use them sparingly, because otherwise they just become another form of punctuation that doesn't add anything substantial. So you want to make sure that you are using them where they should be. And the other thing that Cece used to talk about was, if you're going to use an exclamation point, how else can you show that excitement? Just because you're using an exclamation point doesn't make it more exciting than the next. How can you show that? How can you show the action? So every time you see an exclamation point, like what Cece would tell me, make sure that you are showing. The exclamation point tells you that excitement or that exclamation is there or that something is explained. But what is it about that emotion that you're trying to drive home? So make sure that you are showing the action instead of relying on exclamation points to tell it. Sorry,
All
Cece.
right.
No,
Thank you so much. Thank you.
perfect.
That's really good.
That's something I meant to tell y'all about, and I completely missed it. So this thing that I've highlighted right here, let me ask you a question. What does an ellipsis mean? It means what?
I know now.
It means your voice trails off, right? Wait a minute. So
Yes.
why are we showing it with an ellipsis? Why do we have to tell my voice trailed off? And a deep booming bark echoed through the park, cutting off my train of thought. So here's the thing. Did it trail off or was it cut off? Because the message is not clear. First of all, I would never put a voice trailing off after ellipses because that's obvious. It's like showing and then deciding to tell anyway. Now, but what I would do to fix this right here, because it really sounds to me like she was trying to speak and this booming bark cut her off. So what I would have done, I would have put that and then that. It's clear what happened. Does that make sense to anybody? This is, again, stylistic choice. You can choose to do it. No editor is 100% correct because there are so many editors and they all have different ideas. No author is absolutely correct. They all have different ideas.
Can you explain the difference between the M dash and what its function does and what the ellipses do? Because you talked about the trailing off of speech, but so the ellipses are for the trailing off of speech or for the trailing off of thought. Can you talk a little bit more about the M dash?
Yeah, so the M dash is also cutting off, but it's not trailing off. It's abrupt. Maybe, but boom, bark happened, right? It's an abrupt, and I'm sorry if I hurt anyone's ears with that, but you have an immediate hard stop right there. There's no trailing off. Something cut it off. Something explosive happened that stopped it. So that's what the M dash means. And that is a shortcut you can use on a PC. Alt 0151 will create that for you. So I think 0150 does the N dash, which is totally different. So does that
Now on my Mac, on my Mac, all I have to do is right after I type the but, I could put dash. And then when I start writing again, it'll automatically turn it into my M dash.
You know what it does for me on mine is when I put that in there, it's not always the same size. Sometimes it tries to give me a different size. So this one may measure up now, but it's not always the same size. But how I do get it, because you don't always have to be picky if it's not exactly, if it's a millimeter off. But to get it there, same thing on Word. But if you put a space, it won't happen. You put a character, it'll happen. Okay. So are we clear on ellipses and M dashes and trailing off? And please don't use trailing off if you use an ellipsis because it's obvious. And yeah, it just isn't good.
How about using a stutter? What about if you show a stutter in dialogue and then somebody says the character stuttered? That would be the same general premise, correct? If you're showing the stuttering in dialogue, you shouldn't repeat it inside of your dialogue tag, correct?
Exactly. So you write the stutter, but you don't have to say she stuttered because we can see that she stuttered, right? But now I'm going to tell you a little something I learned that has zero to do with editing, but everything to do with AI narration. And why do I tell you that? Because a lot of y'all are working with AI and there's going to come a point where you're going to work with AI narration. If you put this right here, here's how the AI reads it. Why? Yeah. So just so you know, keep this in mind while you're writing today, because you might one day be narrating with an AI tomorrow. So you might say, I need to find a different way to do that and get creative and find a different way. I have removed those. And so I might put something like, yeah. So it will read it like, yeah, like that. Yeah, yeah. Find some way, or just use your words and say, yeah, he stuttered, but it doesn't show to the reader. So you'll either have to fix it when you start doing your AI narration. And this is an aside and has nothing to do with editing, but I just thought you might want to know that will trip you up when you start using AI narration for your books, which I have begun to do.
Wasn't that the WH-WHAT that we were having issues with? Because it was saying instead of what? It was WH dash.
Yes. So be careful. Test it on your AI program, whichever one you choose to use, your AI narration program, and do a small test sample to see how it pronounces these things.
Are there ways to either just create an edit specifically for the narrator, AI narrator, or because like visually you do want to see it, the stutter that way. When you have the narrator read it, you need to tweak it.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if there's a way to represent it in both manners at once.
Go, Mira.
He wrote WHA dash what? And the audio narrator actually did the what? So she added the A at the end of the WH, and we were able to do that. So I guess you need to maybe pull in some different variations of the word, because she was really looking at that. And then she began to look at some of the other things that might be done in a stutter and how it might sound. And to her point, she was saying, make sure that you are having the AI narration. If you're using a program like that, read it back to you so that you know exactly what it sounds, so that when you release that version of your audiobook, that you don't have all those little oddities in there.
And still it looks good. It looks
Right.
good for the reader.
If your my books are already published, so I had to go through and manually fix stuff. And what I did on some of them, I put a hyphen right here in the navigation search and just went through everything that had a hyphen so I could identify things that needed to be fixed of that nature. I also used M dashes just to make sure I didn't have anything too crazy. So that's something that
Wasn't it the asterisk? That the asterisk also went into an asterisk?
right. In some programs, I use two programs. With one of the programs, it says, it reaches the end of the scene and it says asterisk. Like, what? The Speechify realizes it's a scene change and does nothing. 11 Labs doesn't. So I had to go back through and take out all scene markers, the asterisk out of there so that it wouldn't read it. But I didn't notice it at first when I created the audio. So I found it in my proof listen, I should say. And then I simply went to Resolve, which is a program that I use, and I just clipped it out.
So it's good when you're editing, if you're going to do both. To Cece's point, if you are also looking at having some narration done through an AI, make sure that you are making your document as clean as possible during your pass of editing so that you can use it for both publication and for your audio.
Yeah. I know. We didn't sign up for AI.
Now, and then I saw him. Now, would you leave I saw him, or would you just let it start with a man emerge from behind a tree?
There's several ways to go about this, right? And I'm not going to say I like any one more than any other. And depending on my mood, I might do this because it draws the eye, right? We always look at M dashes. For some reason, they seem to draw the eye. And usually because it means an interruption of something. And so that makes us look. So then I saw a man emerging from behind a tree. And I would end that like that because I want emphasis. This is me though. And you might not be that way. Now, here's another reason why we'll do it. I do not believe that we should ever do things that are harmful to our relationship with a publisher. I'll preface it with that. But so like I wouldn't do double spaces between paragraphs. That's cheating if you're in Kindle Unlimited. But when I'm in Kindle Unlimited, something like this is not cheating. And in Kindle Unlimited, you are paid by the page, right? So if I have this little mechanism right here that extends it, that might give me an extra page done enough times. Not gimmicky. Don't do it like all the time. But when it can stand and when it has merit, that's when I do it. And I don't mind it because it gives me more pages. And I also tend to make my paragraphs a little bit shorter for two reasons. I read a study about how readers don't like to read so much walls of text. They like shorter paragraphs. You're a soccer mom, you're watching the kids playing. It gives you an easy way to find out where you were just by seeing the white spaces and everything. So that's what the study said. So yeah, that's another one of the reasons. So this is one way to fix it.
So you're saying to put a page break there?
No, sir. I'm saying just by making it 2 lines longer, right? Because we just added 2 lines right here, right? And so that doesn't add a page break, but it might bring the chapter. So wherever the end of the chapter is, say, if it was right here, it might have pushed it to right here. And now Microsoft Word is not the same as say, the KDP's EPUB, right? Because now they're using EPUBs, but it might push you just that edge over, and why not? And it works because it catches attention. But I might also do something like this. A man emerged. Because that also, whoa, what? But like, where'd we go? What? We were just on the cusp of something extraordinary. And then a man emerged. That makes me think, what is going on here? What man? And then we go into a little bit of something right here. He was tall, with chiseled features, dark hair that framed his face. That's fine. That's fine. Where it says there was something about him that felt magnetic, I would say there was something about him, something magnetic about him. I would just rearrange that to take out the word felt. Even though it's not used incorrectly here, I just don't like seeing it. So I would say there was something magnetic about him.
Cece, on average, how often once you do your first read of your manuscript from beginning to end to check the pacing and everything? So how many times on average do you go back over your manuscript during the editing process before you get it polished?
It really depends on who wrote it. Because I work with others.
Okay.
I have co-writers that I work with. And so knowing some are this way and some are that way, I might have to read it a little bit, especially if I don't have as much faith in the storytelling and the pacing of the individual. I might want to like read it to catch. But then if I have a lot of faith in them, I know I can dig into the story and just go straight through it. And usually that's the kind of writers I try to work with, only because time is money and I don't want to spend all my time going over something multiple times. So it just depends. If it's my own book, though, because we are talking about self-editing right now, right? So if it's my own book,
Yeah.
I read every day that I write something, and I'm speaking about writing, not AI, okay? Every day that I write something, the day before, I go and look at the day before I start today's and I do an edit. And I always go back 2 or 3 even chapters so I can just check things, make sure there's no typos, make sure everything makes sense, it's cohesive, and also know that I'm picking up in the same flavor where I started. That's probably, I'm not going to tell you that's probably what you should do. Actually, that's probably the best thing that works for me, but you'll have to find the system that works for you. And then also, we have this whole thing with AI stuff. Do you generate the whole thing and then edit? Or do you edit a chapter at a time and check it and make sure it's on point so that you know that the next chapter's beats match what you need them to do based on what happened in the chapter before that. So your style is going to determine how you do your edits, basically. So now here's another thing I would fix right here. Hey, Cleo said. I would kill said, and I would just say Cleo waved. I don't like us. We don't need a dialogue tag and we can use an action beat. I prefer that. So I would just, hey, Cleo waved a hand in front of my face, trying to bring me back to the present moment. Now, we could say, we don't know what Cleo's thinking. We don't, but isn't it pretty universal when someone waves their hand in front of your face, they're like trying to get you back, like they see you zoning out. So I don't mind that being there because it's universally known that's what someone is doing when they're waving their hand in front of your face. So I'm saying this to say, be judicial in what you tell people to do or how you edit and what you take out, because everybody knows what that means. So yeah, we're not in our head, but we know what it means. So just be forgiving on stuff like that and try not to apply the rules too concretely. So sorry, I muttered, tearing my eyes away. That's fine. Anna's gaze followed mine, narrowing slightly as she took in the sun. So this is great. And here's why this is great. Because it's not telling us what she's thinking. It's showing us her eyes narrowed, right? So we know Anna has some kind of suspicion. Don't know what it is. So I noticed the change in her demeanor. I didn't make the connection. Now this right here, what is that? How could she say I didn't make the connection if she doesn't know that there's no connection there? So I want you to think about that we can't do that. She can say I didn't understand it, but she can't say I didn't make the connection because we don't know that there's a connection yet. I hope that's clear. That's how I would think of it. And here we go. Anyway, Anna said, you could take out said and just say Anna's voice was edged with a hint of urgency, and that's fine. Bye, Anna. It was nice meeting you. Cleo called after them, still smiling, but I remained silent. Well, that's fine. That's where I would stop right there. And then I would keep on reading, knowing I still have to fix stuff in here because I haven't read further and I don't know what happens in the plot and I don't know what inconsistencies there are. But I would keep pressing on, which means, yay, Miss Lynn, it's going to be your turn. So I'm going to unshare. If I can figure.
Okay, if you unshare, I'll share.
All right, I'm unshared. Go for it.
Okay, and then I shall share. And I'll talk a little bit about editing in general. My soapbox is you cannot edit yourself. You know exactly what's supposed to be there, and you will see that on the page. No matter what you're doing, whether you're doing from AI generated, But of course, if you go with a traditional publisher, you'll get edited quite a bit. But if you're self-publishing, run it by somebody.
Hey,
Yes.
Lynn, I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
So one of the big component that, like you, that people need to have an editor, but when it comes to doing your own edits, one thing that I always tell people, they have to make sure that they're doing their self edits. And that's different than just doing all of your edits by yourself. Can you talk a little bit about how somebody can do their self edits before they actually send off that manuscript to their publisher? Because we definitely want to make sure that our bodies are as polished as possible before we submit that to an editor or even before we submit it to a beta reader. So what are some of the kind of things that you do to ensure that your body of work is polished?
My first draft is a disaster. And I absolutely do not want anybody to see that. Even my critique group, if I'm with a critique group, I won't submit anything for critique until I've gone over it several times. My first pass, if I'm writing myself, if I'm not using AI, it's dialogue. It reads like a screenplay. And it's bare of description, it's bare of emotion, it's bare of all of these things. I go through several passes of it, and I will make a pass for description. I will make a pass for conflict. I will make a pass for action. I will make a pass for emotion. I will make a separate pass to make sure I've got the hooks and the cliffhangers all together there. Now, as I'm doing each one, I will certainly correct anything else I see.
Now, do you find often with AI written content that sometimes it can read, because this is 100% AI written. So do you find that often it does end up being a little bit more vague than what you're wanting, and that you're having to add a lot of description into the body of work or removing the telling so that you can add the showing?
Absolutely. And the show don't tell is my most common command given to the AI because it really likes to do that. And it has a hard time with the deep point of view that I really like. And we'll see some of this. I can jump into the text here and we'll see some of these things. But yeah, after you have done your own passes and you've got it where you think it's okay, I really suggest running it through a reader where you have the screen read to you, because the screen reader will read what's actually there, not what you think is there. And you can catch an awful lot that way. And one of the things that helped me the best, and I think Mira Gold, you're the same way, is to look at a manuscript, especially if it's yours, that a professional editor has done, because you can see what they're looking for. It teaches you to look for things you're not even aware you should be looking for. So if you're seeing my screen, this is the next bit of the prose. You're seeing beat 5, 6.
Yep.
Okay, good. The first thing is all right. Now, this is one of my pet peeves.
Mine too.
Learned back in the dark ages, all right is 2 words because all wrong is 2 words. And yes, I know that the usage has changed some. In my writing, it's going to be 2 words. And for the AI, it's always 1 word. If you are working with a group or an editing, houses have their standard style guide. So they will have a style. If say you're doing an anthology or something with other people, you need to come up with some sort of style guide. If you're doing your own, be consistent. Don't do it one way on one page and the other way on another page. If you just have to have it 1 word, then go ahead, but make sure that it's always 1 word. And yes, doing with AI, I think the most common activity with editing with AI assisted prose is search and replace, at least search, because there are so many things that it does that you probably don't do in your own writing. Now here, we're going to do That's dialogue, and that's really how most people say that. And I didn't realize that till I had transcriptions of some of my classes done. And it's okay, we'll do that. We can leave Donna. But if you notice, this whole section is just dialogue. Now, that looks an awful lot like my first pass to me. And so I would go back and I would put more character movement, more description. I would get a better feel for the scene. They could be anywhere with just this dialogue. There are two people sitting in a rocker talking. So you want to bring in some of your setting into this and not just go with dialogue. And then here we have we exchange pleasantries. This is the same problem we had in the part that Cece did. It's telling us there's dialogue. Shouldn't we be more descriptive of that? What kind of pleasantries? Dialogue that should feed into the story or skip it altogether. And here we have, I couldn't help but. Yeah, that's on my kill list in the search and replace because it doesn't do anything for the story and it takes the reader out of the story. And it's one of those things like the exclamation marks. When a certain phrase comes up a lot, some people, especially me, I stop reading and start looking to count those phrases. And if I'm doing that, I'm not in the story. So then, okay, she was feeling more grounded. I can let that go. We're seeing that she has been upset in the last days or something, so that's okay. And she has renewed enthusiasm. That's all right. So there's Cleo, and she's going through everything. So now they're back to the game. And that's good. That's where we want the story to go, I think. And here's another all right. I could see the enthusiasm in her eyes. What does enthusiasm in the eyes look like? I don't know. Does anybody else know? And then in the next one, we're awfully focused on Anna's eyes for some reason. Her eyes sparkled with intrigue. Okay, what does that look like? What are we talking about here? Shouldn't we use body language? I know they say eyes are expressive, but I'm not sure I'm not sure eyes express intrigue or enthusiasm. Her voice couldn't express enthusiasm. Her body language couldn't express enthusiasm, but I'm not buying the eyes. However, what I would do, and you see here, I haven't changed anything. I'm taking this like somebody else wrote it. If it was mine, I'd change if I knew what I wanted to change it with. For somebody else, I mark it and I say, this bothers me because it's their story. Yes, sparkling with tears of joy, that would work, yes. Because we can see the tears. It's not the emotion that we're seeing in the eyes. But when I'm editing somebody else's work, I tell them why it doesn't work for me. It's their story. These are suggestions, unless I'm an editor who's paying for it. And then there may be certain rules. But only let somebody who is paying you for use of your manuscript force rules on you. But if somebody points out something to you and says, this doesn't work for me, know that's something that will take the reader out of the story. And so you do want to look at that. I know there's a great writer, Susan Elizabeth Phillips, and she has a first reader. The only thing that reader is to do is to read and mark where she comes out of the story. She's not looking for anything else. She's looking for places where she leaves the story. And that's the way Elizabeth works. Now, I think is really better that if you have somebody looking over your manuscript, anything that catches their eyes that doesn't work, I want to know about. You can give it to, say I have a crime story and I give it to a policeman and say, read to see if this is authentic. Yes, he's primarily looking for police procedure, crime scene methods, but if he sees something else, I want to know about it. I want to know anything that takes anybody away from the story. So then, okay, here we have Cleo breaking in again.
Then how do you feel about LY words in a manuscript?
I don't like many of them, and they need to have a reason to be there They have to justify their existence.
The ly words that you use in your manuscript, often those will tell the reader a little bit about an action, but it's not showing it. So be sure to pay attention to your ly words, because you can have them in dialogue, but if you have content that has ly words in narrative, then chances are you are telling the reader the action rather than showing it unfolding organically.
Exactly. And especially with dialogue tags. If rather than describing the way something was said, make the words say it. Make the words do double duty. Make sure that they're strong. And by the same token, rather than adverbs to modify verbs, you want to use vivid visual verbs. Let the verbs do the hard work, because writing is mostly about the verbs. Strong writing is mostly about verbs. There was something I really wanted to tell you, and I can't remember what it was.
I'm
Okay,
sorry
here.
to interrupt.
No, that was good. That was good. And see, here we have seem to intensify. Well, first seemed as, it was weasel words. Yeah, okay. Remind me about weasel words. But here it seemed to intensify. And had it already, was there a mention of before about it, the warmth? Had we mentioned that? If we hadn't, I know we have because I looked at Cece's part, but if we hadn't, we need to make sure of that. But did it seem to intensify or did it intensify? This is like a do or do not. There's either it did or it didn't. And if it's on her skin, she would know. I'd get rid of seemed. In fact, seemed is on my weasel word list. We need to get rid of all, or at least we need to take a close look at every instance of seemed.
So would you drill down into that specific section and kind of zoom in to show exactly how that locket felt against her chest?
First of all, I would zoom backward to see if we've ever mentioned it before. But then that is a very good place to do more description. And I would probably, if I were doing like a first pass, like I did on this, I use square brackets for look at this. And I would put square brackets around this to as sort of an expand, enhance the description, something that I need to come back and look at. And if I'm using AI, I could throw it into pseudo write and have it do more description about it. I could have it doing expand on it. So let's see here. Okay. This one really gets me. As if sensing my distraction, Anna's gaze followed mine. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Okay. Our viewpoint character is looking at the stranger. So she's not going to see Anna following her gaze. And she's not going to be caring about, is Anna sensing a distraction or not? How do we know? Why do we care? And if she's looking at the stranger, she can't see Anna's eyes narrowing because her focus is on the stranger, and she's not going to be paying any attention to Anna at all. And that's, once again, that's a deep point of view issue. And that's something that AI has trouble with. Okay. And then, now here the necklace began to warm up. If it intensified in the earlier paragraph and it started in this paragraph, we've got that backwards. So we need to look at all the instances of where that necklace being warm is occurring and make sure it occurs in a logical order.
Good catch, Lynn. Very good catch. And to this point, make sure that if there is something important, like in this story, the locket is extremely important. If it is an important item in the story, then you want to make sure that you are following that chronological flow of events. Because how can it intensify if it has never warmed up to begin with? Think about your chronological order of events from one page to the next. And you might have multiple paragraphs between the mentioning of, say, the locket in this case. You may have multiple pages between them or multiple paragraphs. So as the writer, especially when you're reading AI content, you need to make sure that you are paying attention to the flow. Good catch, Lynn.
Okay. And so we'll talk about weasel words for a few minutes and then I'll be done. The weasel words are just very, everybody has their own words that they overuse or use. Sometimes those words, there's words that just aren't necessary. And I think one of the first most valuable things an editor ever taught me was that is most often not necessary. So that's one of the first things I do is I search my manuscript for the word that, and I make it earn its pay if it's going to stay in. So I go through, I have my list of words, but this is the very last step. If it's not the last step, when you're revising and rewriting, you're going to put those back in again. Trust me, you are. Now, to add to those words, now if I'm writing with AI, I also have to add in AI's favorite phrases so that I can go through and check. But make sure your weasel word pass is your very last pass. Because you really want to, whoever you're having edit, and even before your voice read, you want to have it as clean as you can get it. And that's just my process, and it's worked well for me over the years. Any questions on that, Benny?
What's your first step, Miss Lynn?
My first step, give it a brief view, and anything that grabs my eyes, just read through it. And if something grabs me, mark it. And then I go back, and because I've got the dialogue, that section here that I had here, I know I have to do that. So I do a separate description pass, a separate body language pass, a separate movement pass. You know how many words I take to actually create the manuscript? I take that much time, that many words to go through and do my editing passes. And that's why I couldn't write 4 books a year. Anything else? Because now I think Clary's up next, yes?
Actually, Clary had an emergency and needed to leave, so I am going to jump right in.
Okay.
Y'all, I have talked about my writing experience and how Cece was my very first editor. And when I came into writing, I was so green. I did all of the things that we have talked about today. I talked about my character's eyes in third person and first person. When Cece said, no, your character can't see her eyes, I was like, I'm very literal. I'm thinking, I bet she can see her eyes if she's standing in front of a mirror. Or maybe she's seen her reflection in a pool of water. And Cece was like, no, what else can she do? And I know at one point I was so stuck on all these stock gestures of the character walking across the room or the character observing what was happening. And instead of showing the action, I was telling people that my character saw the action. And there's a big difference between saying that my character sees this action unfolding and me actually showing that action. And Cece, how long did it take me to finally get that in my head? I had such a hard time understanding that when it clicked. And I think I broke her, there for a while with all of my, why do you do this? Or how do you do that? So Cece, when you're working with a new author, like you did with me, what are some of the things that you do to help that author grow?
The first thing that I do is start with one problem at a time. So if I give them all the issues with their manuscript, they might get discouraged. And the last thing I want to do is discourage an author. I know you were probably pretty close to discouragement and quitting when I was given your manuscripts to edit. So I take their manuscript and I find the biggest problems that I can find, and I choose which one is the most important one to fix. Usually that's selfish of me because I'm also happy to pick the ones that are most prevalent, shall we say. So I have less edits to do and less work to do so they can learn, because the point of doing edits or learning edits is to apply it going forward. So I might take something like if dangling modifiers because those are a pain to fix. Or I might take,
I was
or I might something like if their chronology is messed up because they're saying that the character did this, like if you can't smell the smoke before the smoke appears. So when you say, I smelled smoke as the house was burned, or as the smoke, whatever, started to rise, you really can't. So you have to make sure that when you're using the word as, that it's actually correct because the two are happening at the same time. And so often people use that incorrectly. I'm sure we're all guilty of it, but they don't happen at the same time.
I abused that so much, Cece, and that was another thing that took me a while to understand, that using as in the middle of a sentence as a coordinating conjunction can actually take things out of chronological order. To Cece's point, how can the character smell the smoke before the smoke has actually occurred? So think about the chronological order of events. It's like your character walking through a cafe door. The bell overhead rings before the character has even walked in. What is that chronological order of event? What happens first? And I swear, I saw that so much in my manuscript. And her asking me repetitive, tell me what happened first. Show me the chronological order. In this case, I couldn't say that the bells over the door rung as the person was walking in. No, I needed to show what happened first. I needed to show that character walking through the door, and as that cause and effect, the character walked through the door, and what was that effect? The bell rung. And it took me a while to understand that. And I was lucky and fortunate enough that Cece was really patient with me, because not all editors are patient in that way. And I just, as I've always said, I was really thirsty for knowledge. And Cece, to her point a while ago, she said that she could only help me with a few items at a time. If she were to have given me a manuscript with every markup that I needed, oh my gosh, I think I would have fallen over. She went through my first chapter, not kidding you. She went through my very first chapter multiple times, probably more than 10 times. And each time she would tell me, these are the 5 things I want you to work on. When you finish that first chapter, I want you to send me that first chapter so that we can make sure that you understand what that process is. And then when she would look at it and give me the all clear, then she would say, now I need you to apply those 5 changes across the whole manuscript. And by doing that, the repetition helped to drill that home. I then was given that same first chapter again. My God, I was so tired of that first chapter, but it helped me because she gave me 5 more things to tackle. And then I had to apply that to the whole manuscript again. And then she gave me 5 more, and then I had to apply those. And by doing that, it helped me grow as a writer, and it taught me craft. Because one of the things that I noticed when I went through my MFA program, this was a couple of years after I went through Cece's extreme editing hard knocks course, I was amazed at how much I had learned with my editor versus what my MFA program was teaching. Don't get me wrong. I learned a lot in my MFA program, but I learned so much more about craft by learning from an editor who was actually a writer herself. And that knowledge was so valuable to me. So today, when I look at my writing and I make a comparison now to what I wrote back in, say, 2013, 2014, leaps and bounds different. Now, to understand where I came from a technical writing background. I had been writing training manuals void of emotion for 14 years. So to come into fiction, I had to rearrange what my process was for fiction writing. Now, I was brand new to track changes when Cece and I began to work together. So not only was she having to help me as an editor to learn about craft and about editing in general, she also had to give me a little crash course on how to use track changes. And if you are not familiar with that and you want to submit to a publishing house, go out, Google track changes, make sure you're familiar with it, because out of all the different publishers that I have worked with, track changes has always been a really important step in the process of editing. So today I'm actually going to show you what my process looks like. I love the fact that Cece showed y'all what she does and what's important to her from an editor's perspective. She actually has to read the whole body from beginning to end. She makes notes and comments about things that stand out to her. Once she reads it that first time and she has pinpointed some of the things that the author needs to work on, she's making sure that there is nothing dire in the manuscript, maybe making sure that there's not an issue with the plot, looking at the pacing. She is going to basically deconstruct the manuscript and see where the problem areas are. She's going to do a deep dive and she's going to do a developmental edit dependent on what the body needs and what she needs to convey to the writer. Lynn, when she went in, she was showing us some copywriting information. She was showing us how to dig down deep. Now, she also had some developmental content in there, and she talked about chronological order of event. When I'm coming in, I'm not coming at it as an editor. What I'm going to show you today, because Lynn and Cece showed you both from an editor perspective and from a writer. I'm only going to show you what I do as a writer. When I get a manuscript, and it's a little bit harder with the AI because even though I control my beats, it doesn't always flow the way that I might think the AI should write it. And it's almost like reading a brand new body of work. I know the story, but I don't know the minute details until I read every word on the page. So I know the premise. I know what my chapter beats said. I know what should be in my chapter. And with AI, we all know that's not always the case. So let me show you something. I am in track changes. If you notice up here at the top, I can state that I can have simple markups, all markups, no markups, or I can show you the original. So if I go in and show you the original, take a look at this. This is what I saw when I first came into looking at this stride 5.6. I have to remove all this. This was generated inside of Story Engine. Story Engine every now and then has a hiccup and it will spit out some of my instructions to it. What do I have to do? I have to kill that. I can't leave that in my manuscript. In addition to that, I was looking at how this opened. It opened with, I could no longer stand Voss's probing gaze. With a flick of my wrist, I activated my crystal amulet. I could no longer stand Voss's probing gaze. I'm telling the reader that my character couldn't stand that probing gaze. So you know what? I need to go in there and show that. So let me show you what I did. I'm actually going to show you all the markups. So let me scroll back up to find where I started. So remember I said that I had to kill all that content? So everywhere you see in red, that is what I have killed in my manuscript. This is how I edit. I kill everything. Now, let me tell you, I hate seeing the changes that are coming up on my screen. I do not like my manuscript lit up like a Christmas tree. So what am I going to do whenever I'm editing? I am going to come up and instead of showing all markups, I'm going to show no markups because that's going to show me exactly the way that I want the page to look. And it's not going to show me any of the items that I have lines through. It's just going to show me the content that I'm leaving and the content that I'm adding. But I want to show you how much I have changed before we actually dig into it. So as you can see, I am here and everything crossed out is what I'm killing. Everything that is underlined is what I have added. So you can see I've added a lot of content to places.
John wants to know.
This is what.
Yep, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Interrupt you.
Go ahead.
John wants to know,
No.
are the lines through, the strikes through indicators of deletions?
Yes. So I'm deleting all of the items with lines through it. And Cece, if somebody has a question in there, feel free to read the question out loud and answer it, because as an editor, I know you know about the track changes stuff. So definitely, I'm not looking at the chat right now. So if you see something, please feel free to jump in and answer it. John, I'm going to change it. Now, I don't like seeing all this. And let me tell you, I had so many errors whenever I sent back a manuscript to Cece, and she was like, girl, what are you doing? Where are all these errors from? I know you write better than this. You have missing punctuation. You have double words. And I'm like, I am trying my best, I told her, but I can't handle it lit up like a Christmas tree. So remember, I wasn't familiar with track changes. So what did Cece say? She said, okay, I need you to go into your review section of your Word document, and I need you to press on the area, and instead of selecting all markups, select no markups. So I did that. And whenever I selected no markups, it is showing me only what I have added. So remember how it said I was uncomfortable with the probing gaze? Go ahead, Cece. Were you going to say something?
No, I didn't say anything.
It was
Oh,
me. I
okay.
just said this
John,
is
that was
nice.
John.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. I would prefer to start it with Voss's probing gaze bore into the side of my head. With a flick of my wrist, I activated the crystal amulet, weighing heavy against my chest. The familiar warmth against my skin had become commonplace. Now, remember, it just said children were playing. That's all it said in the original. How were they playing? What were they playing? I need a good visual of that, because the world that you create is actually a living, breathing thing in your imagination. You need to bring that world to life. It is not just some backdrop or sheet that you're hanging up in the background to look pretty. Your characters need to live there, just like you live in the real world, and you walk into your living room, you kick up your feet, you might watch a movie with popcorn, you might toss it up in the air, you might catch it in your mouth. All those things that you do, your characters need to engage the world also, just like you do. So make them engage the world you have created. So for the children's playful shouts and joyous laughter echoed through Central Park. Now, could I make that even stronger? Yes, but this is a first pass. This is only what I am doing in my first pass. I am going to read this I'm not kidding when I say this. I don't read it once. I don't read it twice. You'd probably be amazed how many times I read a manuscript, because the first time I read it, or even the first 10 times I read it, I'm going to miss something, because I'm going to be so hyper-focused on one aspect of it that I then need to read it again to ensure that I'm looking for repeat words later on. I can't look for repeat words. I can't look for grammatically correct sentences, or if I have some narrator intrusion in there while I'm doing a developmental edit. I'm doing my own developmental edit. I'm asking myself these questions. Have I started in the right place? Am I conveying my character's emotion? Have I shown what's at stake? Is my character's motive clear? And I need to answer all that, because you know what? I better not send something to any editor, or now that Cece and I co-write some things together, I would never send her something that would require her to dig down deep and have to do my self-edits. She should only have to take a second look at something just to make sure that it is cohesive. Or if we are writing in a shared world, she's going to be editing a body while I'm editing one, and then we may switch documents just so that we are familiar with the world that each of us are building. But I'm going to give her the cleanest body of work possible. I'm not going to rely on her to clean up my mess. I'm going to do that myself, because that's my job. I'm not going to send a body of work to an editor and expect that editor to ghostwrite for me. That editor is a valuable resource, and that editor's time is valuable. So I'm going to send the cleanest document that I can, because I want to get the best possible edit possible I don't care about the attaboys. I don't need to be told, hey, this is a great scene, or hey, I loved this. I would much rather the editor spend time on telling me, yeah, this doesn't work. I don't like your character. There's something not boding well. You have dropped your pacing. I want to know what I need to do to fix my manuscript. I don't need a pat on the back. I need to know how to strengthen it. So in this industry, you need to grow some thick skin. Me, I'm a little bit tenacious when it comes to edits because I constantly want to see somebody's other point of view. I want to see their perspective. I want to see what direction they're coming at. Because if I can see my body through another set of eyes, that means that I have a whole other way of looking at my work. And that means that if somebody sees my work in a different viewpoint, then that means I'm going to have readers that might look at my work that way. I'm going to give any edit that I receive or comment, I am going to listen to it. I'm going to examine it, and then I'm going to look to see if I apply that content to my manuscript. Does it enhance it? Does it take away from the direction that I'm going? If it will enhance my manuscript, I'm going to keep those nuggets. If it doesn't, then I at least thought about it, and then I will move forward. So here I went ahead and went a step further. I have a group of kids ran about, deeply immersed in a rowdy game of freeze tag, their sneakers thudding against the pavement with each dash back and forth. One boy froze in an exaggerated pose, arms and legs splayed, while his friends swirled around him in a chaotic dance. Now, why am I doing this? I'm a very visual writer, so I'm wanting to set the scene. I will set the scene that this is an ordinary looking park, and I want to set the scene that it is family oriented. I want to set the scene that maybe my character came here with her mother. I want to establish all of that by showing this so that when I flow into her discovering that there's something amiss, I've already painted an image of what is normal and what might look off, so that we can begin to see maybe some elements of magic. Because remember, Laura knows nothing about magic. Voss and my love interest know 100% about that. But I need to make sure that the head that I'm in understands the flow of things. Now, right now, I am inside of one character's head. Remember, I'm in the love interest's head. So he has Voss, who is our antagonist. That gaze is boring into his head. I have him going back to the human world. Remember, he used to be human. So here I have him watching these kids playing. So he's in the human world. He is reliving some of his humanity. As he's going deeper, remember, right now we're in his head. But later on, when I'm in Anna's head, I need to show how magic impacts her on her level. And then I also need to show how magic is commonplace to the love interest. So I need to make sure that I am showing that from both POVs. When I am in her head, I need to show what it looks like to her. When I'm in his head, I need to show it from his perspective. So here it talks about how the male character, the occasional frisbee still arched overhead between pairs of laughing teens. If I'm showing the park from her perspective in her chapters, I'm going to show it as a normal, mundane life. And then I'm going to flow into the magic, like little elements. In his chapter where we're at right now, I'm going to show that human side of it. I'm going to show that longing of how he might miss that connection. And that helps to develop my character so that people get a sense of who my character is at the core. Are there any questions right now, Cece?
Nothing.
I had a question just about the head, because when we started, I thought it was the other character that flicked him off.
Voss is not the character whose head I'm in. It is the love interest. So keep in mind that there was a whole section right here that I bypassed. So up here, we know that, let me go all the way back up here. We are in Ilan's POV. Ilan has come to Central Park. He has he's stepping out. And look, here's the sun has dipped. I haven't edited this part. He has stepped where he is between the veil, between realms. So we are in his perspective. We are in his head. And because we're in his head, we need to see the world through him. So up to the point, all this point right here, it shows him in the veil. He's watching, he's looking at Laura. He is contemplating coming back to see her. But then Voss comes up and steps out of a shadow and begins to talk to the love interest. And there is not a very friendly relationship between the antagonist and the love interest because they know each other, that there are ice shards between them, that the silence is like ice shards. They don't care for one another. And they're going back and forth and they are talking about, so my love interest character says, Voss, I replied, my voice tense. You have a knack for appearing at the most inopportune moments. Or perhaps I'm just very observant, she replied coyly. So again, it's showing that tension. So you didn't see this before. And this is all from his perspective. And they're talking about the human world. And Voss wants to know why he's so interested in this human. And he's trying to keep his emotions calm so that Voss doesn't pick up on him having an interest in this human. And remember, in this world, it is forbidden for people in the hidden realm, like him, who's a guardian, to engage with the humans. And it's definitely forbidden for them to have any type of romantic involvement. So this does have a forbidden romance element to it when you're looking at tropes. The reason why it says Voss's probing gaze bore into the side of my head. So he's getting really tired of speaking with Voss. He wishes that she would just go away. With a flick of his wrist, he activates that crystal amulet and he actually enters into the human area, at least enough to see the children playing. And that touches upon his humanity. Again, I added content here to show what that looks like so that I can paint a picture of him longing for that part of his life that he no longer has, because he is no longer human. So he does not have that kind of connection.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense.
So here he is standing at the cusp between the two worlds. He stepped out a little bit. He has now stepped back because remember, he's not supposed to have any interference. So he steps back and the world around me blurred in and out, shifting between the hidden realm and that of the human. My shoes sank into the soft moss. The fine hairs on the back of my neck rose, sending goosebumps to pepper the skin in response. Now, you'll notice this is in italic. It's his deeper internal thought. Something's off. A faint energy buzzed in the air, a remnant of the aura I had picked up from the woman, from the human plane. It seemed to have followed me across the realms, causing minor distortions in the otherwise serene landscape. An unfamiliar flower sprouted nearby, its vibrant petals unfurling like delicate fingers reaching for the sky, a phenomenon unseen before in this realm. What am I doing? I'm painting a picture. I am letting the reader know, oh, there's something about this flower. Now, in the earlier part of this story, in chapter 1, right now we're in 2, in chapter 1 ends with Laura having a birthmark, and the birthmark kind of itches and tingles, and then all of a sudden that birthmark begins to look, it begins to change, and to her, it's starting to look like a blooming flower, and she's thinking, okay, it itches, what's going on here? Is it a hive? What is it? And that's how it ends. So you know that something magical is happening, but remember, Laura doesn't believe in magic yet. So now we have this scene in his chapter where this flower is blooming and it mirrors the blooming flower on her arm, which helps to build that motif or symbolism that we're weaving into the book for regrowth. So again, you want to think about how you can plant some of that content into your body of work. the AI put all of it in there? No, but you are the writer. You are the one who has to go in and feed this content to the AI. So let me show you again what all the markups look like. So remember, here's this something's off that I added. I added all this information about the children. So this is what I've added, all the stuff in red that's underlined. And as you can see, I have added stuff. I've scattered it throughout. So this section here, I felt was 100% telling, where it said, shifting my gaze from the flower to the horizon, I caught sight of distant figures moving against the backdrop of the hidden realm's lush landscape. That's interesting, but who are they and what are they doing? What is their purpose? I could easily just delete that, but that's interesting. I know that there are some politics. So I need to drill down a little bit deeper. Now, Cece talked about filter words. Do you see where it says I leaned down? You know what? I could show that more active. I'm not going to do that here because I know I'm going to edit again. Right now, I am working on trying to build what this world looks like. I am giving it more description, and I am going to go over this over and over again. I leaned down to examine a vibrant purple flower, its petals unfurling toward the sun. So remember when I talked about the flower? I'm going to show it in great detail here. And I'm going to talk about the politics and the power struggle of the outside world and how it felt very far away. I'm going to talk about the tiny blossom and how it is extending in its own simple realm of soil, sun, and water. And I'm going to build that description. Now, here again, there's that filter. I caught, I watched. Those are all areas when I go back to do my editing. I'm going to keep some of those, but I'm going to kill a lot of them and make this even more active than what I've done on this first pass. What I've done on this first pass is very minute compared to what I'm going to do in my next couple of passes. Does that help to see that process, guys?
It's great. Why are they called filter words?
Cece, do you want to take that?
You go ahead because I think I covered in the first one and maybe I didn't cover it clear enough. So maybe you can do it better.
So when you use a filter word, this is my interpretation of the filter word, and it may differ from the way somebody else sees it, but this is the way that it makes sense to me. And from a subjective point of view, when I think of filter words, I think of filters as being those words that are basically telling the story. It is filtering out the action. And those filler words are preventing me from being active. Those filter words, instead of me being able to state, where is it? I caught sight of distant figures. I caught sight. I am telling the reader that I caught the sight of those distant figures. That filter right there, it is taking away from my body. Now, we could definitely go out and take a look. Let's see. Let me pull up. I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. I am going to pull up chat and let's talk to chat and make sure I am logged in there. And then I am going to share my screen again. So let's go in and you have a question. What are filter words? How do they impact your manuscript? How do you fix them? It will describe the immediate action, but remember when I said that it filters the experience, it filters out that action. It is basically telling the reader. And if you go in and you identify those areas of filter, you can actually take that weak prose and make it stronger. So here it lets you know, here and hearing, she heard the birds. Fine. What did the birds sound like? Can you show the action? The impact on fiction manuscripts. It reduces the immersion. It keeps the reader from actually being able to fall deeper into your body of work. It is weaker prose because you are using passive, sometimes wordy or overt explanations. And it can slow the pace sometimes because it's just telling the reader and it can pull them out. How to fix it? The first step is to recognize and understand what the filter words are. So you can hear it from beta readers, critiques, self-editing, an editor can point it out. Let's ask, give me 10 examples of filter words in sentences, and then show how to rewrite the sentences in active voice without filters to show the action instead of telling. So again, she felt a cold breeze brush her face. What did it feel like? Now, we could even take this rewritten one where it says a cold breeze brushed her face. We could actually take number one and ask number one to expand that, because even though we rewrote that and made it more active to say that a cold breeze brushed her face, what does it look like? Can we expand on that and be more descriptive?
Yeah, or what does it do to her? Well, how does she respond to it? Because I feel like we're looking for the response of the cold breeze when we say she felt.
So again, we're going to ask the AI to take number one and write it out in a vivid descriptive scene. How does it feel on her skin? Where is she? Can you paint the full picture? So let's see what it does. So if I were to just have, she felt a cold breeze on her face. So here, a cold breeze swept through the clearing, rustling the dried leaves and sending a shiver down Isabel's spine. It brushed her face, delicate as a phantom's touch, leaving her cheeks tingling with its icy caress. Goosebumps erupted on her arms and her eyes closed, lashes fluttering like moths. Now, do you have to be that detailed? No, you
I
don't
love
have
it though.
to be. But can you see the difference between just saying that your character felt a cold breeze versus what that cold breeze is doing? So let's look at number two. He saw a snake slithering in the grass. So let's change this up. Let's say number two and write it out in a vivid description. How does it feel? Let's see. How does it make Jack, the central character, feel? Where is he? Can you paint the full picture? And make him a snake wrangler. Let's see what that does. So again, we want to know what that looks like, that snake slithering. We want to know what that looks like from our character's perspective. Now, one of the things I want to point out, AI can do some really cool stuff, but just like in the other sample where it said, suddenly this happened, you know what? I abuse that. And Cece would tell me, if it's happening, is it really sudden in the viewpoint of your character? Because you don't say, if you're sitting on, say, a cliff or a bluff and you're watching the sunrise, are you sitting there thinking to yourself, suddenly the sun came up over the horizon? You don't think that way. So why should your prose say, suddenly this happened? Because at the moment that it happened, it actually happened. So kill that suddenly. Same thing when you are looking at some of the other items, like without warning. Now you just gave the reader a warning. Don't give the reader a warning. Just start with a subtle movement in the tall grass to his right caught his attention. A snake, its scales gleaming, it mesmerizing pattern of browns and greens slithered gracefully. What does gracefully look like? I could actually flesh that out even more if I wanted to. If I really wanted to drill down into it, its tongue flicking out to taste the hot air. Jack's heart raced. All the characters' hearts race at one point or another when AI is writing. The snake was a deadly inland. Okay, so we have a deadly, formidable creature here. I don't know what direction we're going. I don't know what my character's fixing to do. But now, isn't this better than just reading that the snake slithered on the ground? Yes, that tells me what the snake did, but does it paint me a visual picture of what is happening? It doesn't. So that's when you hear somebody say, flesh it out, show, don't tell. This is what we're talking about. Are there any questions about that?
Yes, please. Can you share that chat GPT link in the chat because you have requests?
Sure. Give me just a minute and I will pull that up.
Thanks for diving deep on this. It's really fantastic to see.
Sure. And again, like I was telling you, I didn't know this stuff. And I was picking Cece's brain. And every time she sent me a new edit on a manuscript, I was like, Cece, what do you mean here? And it was so funny because she would tell me, please don't hate me. I have marked up your manuscript like a Christmas tree. And I'm like, oh, it was so exciting. I can't even express how exciting it was to open up that manuscript and see that I had edits. And I tackled each one of those edits with an open mind to think about, okay, what am I going to learn today? What am I going to learn to do better today? None of her comments were a direct attack on my body of work. Her comments were to make my body of work stronger. And at one point, and I joke because at one point, Cece was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of this character. And I knew that there was something wrong with her. And Cece was like, you've added the serial killer ring in. It feels so much better than the forced romance book that you were trying to write. Now that you have turned it into a romantic suspense, you have your serial killers in here. I am just so done with your character right now because I want her to be so much more. And by her telling me that, I already knew that there was something wrong with my character. And I really needed to have a heart-to-heart with that character. And by being able to look at my character through the eyes of my editor, I was able to see where she was flawed. I did not give her enough flaws. I did not make her have enough at stake. I did not give her a deep enough personality. I did not scratch below the surface of the skin of who she was. I wasn't diving into that deeper POV to show who she was at the core. Therefore, the reader could not relate to her. And that is something that it took time for me to understand and learn. Cece, was there anything you want to add?
She did have flaws, but they were the raw flaws, right? So this was a love.
That's true. That is true.
It was a love story, and she was jealous of a guy who wasn't the love interest checking out another girl. Well, we know that's a no. We can't do that in romance. She's not going to be jealous of her. She's supposed to be, well, in romance, you're dedicated to the one that you're in love with. And on the note of love interest, I'm just going to add that. So I don't ever call the other character in my love stories the love interest. And the reason for that is if I'm giving each of them a POV and each of them have their own set of chapters, each one of them is traveling the hero's journey separately and together. And sometimes they're at odds and sometimes they're not. So in order for me to flesh that story out fully, I have to remember that these are two fully fleshed out characters, each with wants and needs and flaws, that they can't be just a love interest. It has to be two protagonists, each one on a hero's journey that I have to define clearly in my head so I can give them, so none of them are flat. So neither one is flat. So I never just, and that's different people think different way. It's just terminology, but think about that. Sometimes when you're writing a love story or something of that nature, that person is on a journey too. By the same token, so is your antagonist. So don't be afraid to think about that antagonist as having a journey and fleshing that character out fully, because there's nothing like having a stale, flat antagonist. Who cares? So it's my only thought.
And that was a great thing for us to have as a conversation. And I know that I spoke about this earlier in some of the early videos that we did for this segment, but I was actually writing a romance book. I am not a typical romance reader. if there is not action in there, if there is not some type of action adventure story where the stakes are high and somebody is probably going to die any time now, and it's probably going to be really gruesome. If that is not happening, I'm more than likely not going to read that. But I need action. I like to read thrillers. I like to read something with, like I said, with high stakes. I was trying to write specifically something that I thought that a publisher would pick up. So it wasn't something that I was really all that interested in, but I was trying to force myself to write a story that I did not feel. And why did I do that? Because I wanted to be picked up by a publisher. So I researched the publisher. I looked and read some of the books, and let me tell you, they were really good books, but it's just not what I typically read. So I read books, I got an idea of what the publisher wanted, and then I tried to write a book, but I couldn't stay focused on just that single thread of just the girl meets guy and they fall in love and have a happy ever after. I just kept wanting to throw in a serial killer. I wanted to throw in something else, but then it really wasn't a true romance that way. And I was fortunate enough that when Cece got my manuscript, she looked at it and said, "Is this really the story you want to write? Because I'm thinking this is not the story you truly want to write." And I told her, "No, not really. I really want it to be more on the thriller side." And she said, "Okay, I need you to take it back. I need you to revise it. I need you to write the story you want so it doesn't feel forced." And so when I took it back and I rewrote it and I sent it back to her, that's when I stopped trying to force my story to be something that it should have never been. And that kind of freed me up to be able to write the story I wanted. And I know that some people write 100% to a template and they'll write to market. I am generally not one of those writers. Cece is great at that. She can analyze a book. She can stay on task. She can stay on focus. Me, I have really good intentions of staying on point, but the allure of something shiny and all of a sudden there's a killer in there and we're tracing the killer and oh my gosh, there are clues over here. My book becomes something different and it falls outside of what I have researched. So it doesn't fit that niche 100%. But you know what? That's okay for me because I'm okay with that as a writer. And even though I have good intentions of following a specific niche 100%, if I then jump out of that and begin to write something different, as long as I know that I have made that directional change, then I'm okay with that. But if I make that directional change and I don't realize I've done it, then I need to go back to the drawing board and learn more about my craft. Cece or anybody have any questions, thoughts, nuggets?
No nuggets, no nothing. Anybody want to speak up? Can unmute themselves if they want to at this point.
And Manon, yes, it is so hard to write nonfiction. I've started a couple of nonfiction bodies and the raw emotion in them just makes me relive the information over and over again. And it makes it really hard to write that content because it brings up all those emotions. Some of them are good. Some of them make you laugh. Some of them make you laugh and cry. And then some of them are just disheartening. So I can understand where it can be hard fiction and telling a true story.
Yeah, not just that is at the end of you already know what happened, so you try to get everything like in the present tense. Because if you go in the past tense, I think it doesn't bring the person or the reader inside the story. But you do it at the present tense, and you have to bring them to the scene, describe the scene so they feel and really, if they close their eyes, they can see it behind their eye, the eyes closed. And this is when you tell all the editing of a book, you bring me to when you write the story, which is true and not something from an AI because it's coming from you or from someone who's telling you the story that you have to write for them, and you have to have all those details. And as when you edit a book like that, and I'm sorry if I'm taking the whole.
Oh no, you're good. You're good.
Okay. is when you do editing a book like that, sometimes we have some roadblocks. We don't want to bore the reader, but at the same time, you have to give them all the details that they understand what happened at the present time, and don't give them that at the end she's going to be saved. You really have to put them in, like you said, our emotion, our pain is all, you have to give it to them.
You do. And you have to do that in a very descriptive manner. And keep in mind that just because it's nonfiction does not mean that you cannot take creative. You can actually take those creative liberties. This is your body of work. You're fleshing it out. And remember, it is creative nonfiction. It is based on something real. And it's okay to add other content in there. I've written some sections on my mother-in-law who had dementia, and there are scenes that are just funny and with our interaction, and I will cherish every minute I spent with her and learning about her life as things were changing and her bubble was shrinking and shrinking. I would never replace that. And I'm glad that I was there. Was it hard? Yes. Can I write about it? You betcha. But it is hard. But remember, you can always take some creative liberties when you are writing nonfiction.
Yeah. And I can relate to you, and you know that because I'm living with my dad who has dementia at the present time. And I already start a book and take all those little things that they do. And some people will say, okay, why not on the floor crying? I says, no, I'm turning it into something that makes me smile. And that's what I'm doing in the book on dementia that I'm writing.
Yeah. It's all those good memories, and you have to make those memories last. And that's important. Are there other questions, thoughts, writing?
This has been a great session, Mira Gold, Lynn, Cece. This is just, thank you so much for doing this.
And thank you so much, John, for jumping in at the last moment. I really appreciate everything that you did with us today. Cece, if there are no other questions, would you close us out today?
Might be a little bit confused. Were we going to hear from Mano and Joe?
Oh, John, would you like, John, was there anything additional that you wanted to? Manon had said that she wanted to talk back and forth just a little bit. So we were doing that, and I know she was engaging in the chat. And then John said that he would also help in the chat. But if there's anything additional that y'all would like to add, please feel free to do that before we close out today.
All I'm thinking is the people using narrators, it's hard to use the AI narrators. It's hard for me because I read and I hear it in my head, and it's very different from what I listen to from an AI narrator. And I know it's good. It's like seeing it in a mirror more, but it's almost like reading the single word at a time thing, which I just saw on the Kindle, where it'll put your eyes in the middle of the page and show you one single word at a time. And I can't see the paragraphs. I can't hear it in my head. So another way to do it is you could read it out loud and then listen to yourself reading it back instead of relying on an AI narrator. And just as we're doing this, as I'm listening to it, as I'm watching it, there's so much stuff that's in there that is poetic, that is, this little bit rhymes with that little bit, and it feels so good when it does for a particular point. And I keep hitting at it at that level, and I need to pull back and look at the larger strategies that you guys are sharing.
Yeah, I agree right there with John. I'm using Speechify myself. I think WordSpinner is using too. And every Monday I have a class with, I want to say that, non-AI writers. And one of my girl there, she says, "Want to give us part of your manuscript directly on the screen so one of us can read it back to you." And then this way it gives you a much different perspective when you have in a group and you listen to your own story told by someone else in a different accent and voice tone. And compared to the computer and WordSpinner was saying, that's true, the whoop whoop or the stutter, the computer doesn't know how to say it. And that was cute because that's something now I can pay attention on how to write it so that not just a person can say the person is doing the stutter, but also that the computer can read it and it doesn't do the WH what. True, that's what it does.
And also, it just seems to me that when the person reads it, they read chunks of words together much better than the AI does at this point.
Definitely. And as AI continues to evolve, we are going to see so many wonders. And as authors, we use so many different resources today, and AI is just one more resource for us to be able to command. Because keep in mind, we're the people who are directing the AIs. The AI does not direct us. The AI cannot write the story. The AI cannot push send on its own. We are the ones who are inputting the information. We are hitting the send. We are having that conversation. It's a directional conversation with the AI to be able to produce the stories that we do today. I am really looking forward to seeing what kind of changes take place tomorrow, a year from now, 10 years from now. So I'm really excited to see where things will go. Now, if you enjoyed this segment from beginning to end, from the first class on what is in a POV, all the way to today's editing class, join us on our Discord for the AI Writers Connection, where we have all kinds of conversations when it comes to craft. And if there is a specific item that you would like for us to cover, please be sure to let us know. Leave a comment in the Discord, leave a comment on our YouTube videos under the comments section. Cece, are there any other questions that you can see?
Do not see any other questions. I do want to send out a small reminder that Miss Lynn mentioned, that you need to have a thick skin when you're asking for edits. Also, sometimes the most helpful edits are the most critical ones. Those are the ones that can tell you what's wrong. But here's another thought. You are the final word on your manuscript. If an editor tells you something, just tell them to go take a hike if you don't like it. Not literally, but just ignore it. You can accept or reject their changes at will. Now, also, not all editors are created equal, so shop around. Best way to get an edit, I found in the very early beginning, I joined contests, and I made sure the contests had people I wanted to hear from. They were experienced editors, experienced writers, particularly in a genre that I wanted to get feedback on. Cost maybe $30, $40, $50. Give them 30, 40 pages, whatever it was, and they give you very good feedback. Very good. You can't put a price on that. So that's all I had. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of newer releases. And we appreciate y'all coming in. Have a great one. Just like that.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.